Welcome to The Growth Switch, the podcast where we dive into the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. In every episode, we're going to sit down with industry leaders, innovators, and problem solvers to explore the real stories behind business growth, the pivotal moments, the surprising insights, and the hard-earned lessons that make all the difference. Today, I'm excited to welcome Scott Ortes, the Vice President of Operations at Suna Solutions. Welcome to The Growth Switch, Scott.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So for viewers, if you don't know this, we're lucky to have Scott Ortes, the Vice President of Operations at Suna Solutions. He's a seasoned expert at human resources, workforce strategy, and talent acquisition. Got 15 years of experience. Today, we're really going to dive into some really awesome stuff. So again, thanks so much for joining us on the show. And so, to start things off, why don't you go ahead and get into what is it that you do and how did you get there?
Great question. Every day is a little bit different, so it's always fun for me to try to answer that first question. Big scale, my company is providing managed services for mid-sized businesses to better manage their temporary workforce or traditional staff augmentation. And my role within the company is basically once our sales team has brought on a new MSP client, my team is taking that relationship, implementing it, is walking through all the steps to get the client ready for service, executing vendor contracts, conducting RFIs, selecting a technology, lots of things that go into it. And then once implementation is complete, my other team are the program managers that are actually managing the
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you personally get into that field?
Yeah, so I, like most other people in the broader HR community, fell backwards into it. About 15 years ago, I was on the job market and got a call from one of the large recruiting firms, and they were looking for somebody at the time to manage their San Diego market. My background was in sales and client management, and they were looking for somebody that could step in and learn the recruiting side, but really help to nurture their client relationships and grow their business. And so it was kind of trial by fire. I spent the first couple of months kind of sitting at my recruiter's desk, learning what it is that they actually did. And then I found that I really, really liked what I was doing. I spent a few years at that company, and then eventually I got my way into kind of it's almost a version one of what I'm doing now. I took over a very large MSP program for a Fortune 500 company that's located in San Diego, and spent a few years kind of learning that side of the business before I was hired by Suna Solutions. It eventually ended up helping me kickstart this MSP service that we're now primarily doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is it about Suna that drew you into their ecosystem that you decided that you really wanted to work for them?
So really funny that you asked the question. When I first started, again, in my first job within the staffing industry, I was in a relatively traditional sales role where like more than 3/4 of my time was spent doing business development. And as I'd be calling on different customers in the San Diego market, there was this one name that kept coming up that it's like every time that I heard Suna Solutions, that customer would never talk to me. They were always so happy with the service that they were getting, just wanted nothing to do with comparing with other options. And then when I started with that second job that I mentioned, I wasn't in a sales business development sort of role. I was really managing a large client relationship, but I also had a large team, and I felt like I was kind of continually hiring for that growing team. And I ended up trying to poach a number of employees from Suna, and heard almost the exact same thing from any employee that I would speak to at Suna, that, no, we love working here. It's such a great place to work. And so I was never successful with hiring away any of their employees. And so I figured that if I can't steal any of their clients, I can't steal any of their employees, I might as well go join them myself.
Yeah, the old adage, if you can't beat them, join them, right?
Exactly. 8 years later, here I am.
But that's awesome. I mean, what a funny story. So, it is interesting because Suna does something a little bit differently than other people. A lot of companies, I think out there right now don't exactly have a standardization or a strategy. So go ahead and walk me through what Suna does, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So we started off as a traditional staffing company. It'll be 16 years this year. Since we were founded. And when I joined the company 8 years ago, it was actually to help to implement our first true MSP managed service provider program with a long-term client. The idea behind what that service is that you're taking disparate relationships with vendors, processes that are kind of maybe perhaps different depending on the department that you're working with, not a lot of standardization around processes, vendor contracts. Contingent workers are, really only known if they happen to be captured on a spreadsheet by HR or TA. So it's not a very smart way, right, to manage what is often a very large spend category for companies. And so I helped to implement this first program for Suna, and it seemed to be a good success. And so I actually put together a business plan and presented to our owner that this is something that we should be doing. We should be going out after these kind of small to mid-sized companies that are in a kind of a good growth phase and could use a lot of these great tools to be able to manage their contingent workforce more efficiently and effectively, because there's really nobody out there in the market that is specifically doing that. MSP is a very prevalent model within the Fortune 500 segment. And in fact, the penetration is greater than 90%. So it's not not an unknown model if you're talking about large scale contingent labor programs, right? But the fact of the matter is that a small to mid-sized business can receive all of the same benefits that a very large company does. And there's really no reason that they shouldn't have access to it. So what we did was we just distilled down kind of what those companies needed, taking the great practices that a large company would have and making it relevant to a mid-sized employer.
Absolutely. And it's interesting there that you note that it's really smarter spending more than people just throwing money at a problem and saying, well, here's some more money, maybe this will fix it. And then when it doesn't fix it, they realize they have to throw even additional money on top of something because they didn't get the right solution in the first place, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So do you guys only offer that MSP, or is there other things that you offer as well?
Yeah. So we still do traditional staffing and employer of record services that hasn't changed from 16 years ago. But really, our newest division that we launched a few years ago, Suna Workforce Management, is focused primarily on MSP, but we have some other, I call it kind of similar services that fall within that managed service category. So we have a technology that we sell that helps to operationalize a lot of the things that I just mentioned, although we've got great partnerships with other technology providers that do similar functions. We also have begun offering management services around statement of work. So this is really a growing area within the broader staffing industry, right? A little bit of a pivot away from using a typical temporary worker and instead buying outcomes rather than headcount, right? So I need to get this project done, so I'm going to work with a service provider to get this website built or this software application built. And so they want to purchase that outcome rather than I'm going to go out and find 5 software developers that are going to do this for me.
Right.
And so it's a kind of a natural evolution of our services that we're able to offer some oversight and some standardization across how those services are contracted and managed, give visibility to kind of who's approving the spend, the dollars that are being spent and the performance of those vendors. So we've pulled that service in and are seeing a good uptick over the last year in clients kind of pulling us into that. And then kind of tangentially, use of independent contractors and evaluating them to make sure that they're compliant based on local legislation, and then managing their activity to make sure that they're on for the appropriate amount of time, kind of doing the appropriate work, and aren't ending up miscategorized when they should have been employees and opening that client to potential penalties.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both of those situations really digs into that, like you kind of don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
If you can know that there's like a finite cap on the amount of money that you're going to pay to get a project done, it's better than just, again, throwing money at the problem and trying to get warm bodies in the seats and saying, hey, why don't you guys fix this? Why don't you guys fix this? When you really don't quite know what you're fixing or what the overall cost of that is going to be, versus coming up with that project. Yeah. So, this sounds, really promising. It sounds like the market absolutely needs it. Are there any problems or challenges that you guys are facing right now at Suna?
Yeah. I'd say that the absolute number one problem is finding those companies that are right at that pivot point to where they've been able to sustain as a smaller organization and, handle managing their temporary workers on spreadsheets and sending emails and kind of doing it that old fashioned way to where it makes sense for a professional service like ours to step in and start to give them a hand. So
Yeah.
finding companies that are right at that point, that's always a challenge. And it's always what, getting our name out there, providing a lot of education. We really pride ourselves in not just taking our solution and, for lack of a better term, jamming it down people's throats. We really want to provide them with a lot of education around what it is that we do, why it's important, why it's something that they should be investing the time and resources to get a program like this up and running, and what the benefits are going to be to them in the near and long term. And we've had some success with that. It's just, it's slow, methodical process getting that word out there.
For sure. And I mean, it sounds like you guys do a great job of doing what it is you actually do. The hardest part is just getting the word out there. If you have a nice, valuable piece of advice that you could leave the listeners with, what's something that they could walk away from this podcast with that you have that's unique, interesting?
Yeah, so I'd say if there's one thing that you could really take away from this podcast, I have always been a big believer in utilizing your network, right? We've got great tools these days to be able to do that. A lot of people are still working from home. They're working with, colleagues that are perhaps on the other side of the world. So utilizing tools like LinkedIn, tools like Teams, Zoom, ways that you can stay connected to people around you to reach out and talk through problems, uncover how other people have found solutions, utilize those networks that exist.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost the same situation that we were just talking about earlier, which is you guys have a great product. The biggest thing is to find companies at that pivotal moment where they need your product and they can rapidly expand and systematize and really just like explode with growth because of their relationship with you. And I feel like that's almost the same in the other regard as well. It's just like, these tools are out there. If you don't know what tools they are, you really need to get onto the right tools and be using those tools for optimal success. Yeah.
Great.
So, it's interesting because you guys are a company who, works with other companies, this B2B model, you're going to help these other companies ramp up their success. Do you also outsource some of your headaches and your hassle? And do you outsource some of your work to other companies as well?
We do. And I only struggle to think because I think one of the things that has made our organization successful is that we don't do a lot of outsourcing. Actually, we have very particular ways that we like to do things. Our Suna way. We do have some like technical accounting that we outsource primarily related to auditing, and then we have some consultants that we get engaged for kind of specialty HR work when we have unique scenarios come up. And then a lot of our legal services are outsourced to various firms. For the most part, we've developed a lot of in-house knowledge and capability to make our organization successful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, it sounds like it's incredibly successful and so successful. It's even like, when you were saying earlier, you couldn't poach people at Suna when you're working for another company because they're doing great. And it sounds like now that you're working there, like that same situation, you guys are doing great,
Yeah.
So it sounds like, before you were working with Suna, you weren't able to poach people or get clients from Suna because the model is working really well. There's obviously a lot of success going on. So how do you define that success? And are there measures of success beyond only the financial metrics that you perceive as success for a company?
I certainly do. I don't know that we had done a really good job of measuring that previously, but about 2 years ago, we embarked on a mission to start doing some measuring. And so how that played out was in the form of satisfaction surveys, primarily driving at net promoter scores. And we're using that now as kind of our key metric to decide how are we doing as an organization. MSPs, when we look at the broader MSP industry, maybe a dozen different competitors that you would put into that category, measure abysmally on an NPS. Again, if you're not familiar, a net promoter score, you're measuring anywhere between negative 100.
Yeah, it's very popular these days.
Yeah. And so the industry average for MSPs is at a negative 29%. Right. So generally not the most, I mean, you think, kind of what the work is that we're doing. It's not exciting. It's not sexy, right? Like we're, using SOPs and softwares to, get temp workers in the door. It's not, there's not a lot of area for razzle dazzle, but we actually just at the end of month wrapped our biannual round of surveys. And for our MSP division, our client NPS score was a positive 63%.
That's absolutely amazing. I mean, it's like, it's the point where, you wanted people to just not hate it. So if you could just get it to zero from like, if you guys were in that general category where people really dislike MSPs and they're at negative 29%, if you could just get it to zero, that would be a win. But getting it up into a positive is fantastic. And up to, I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. And the commentary is fantastic. It's like, the highlight every 6 months, I get to read all these really, really nice comments from very happy clients about our performance. So,
Yeah.
not saying that there aren't some areas to improve. We take all the survey data. I think the comment section is a gold mine for finding how can we make that 63 into a 64 or 65 or 66%. Right. And so we actually, I think it was a total of 15 action items we took from our last round of surveys saying, hey, if we can put these things into motion, we can increase our NPS for, our clients. We also measure it for our own temporary employees that we have on assignments with clients. And we actually also measure it for the vendors, the other staffing agencies that are participating in our MSP programs, which I've not been able to find any sort of validated information about that from any of our competitors. I don't know that that's really an area that they have looked at and said, hey, we need to be impressing the vendors that are on our staffing programs, making the staffing agencies happy too. That's one thing I think has been a major differentiator for us is that we've got staffing agencies that literally like refer business over to us. They're like, we want to work with you more to try and win these accounts away from your competitors and give us insider intel. Our NPS score on this last round was a positive 60% for our vendor relationships,
Which is massive.
Yeah. Great result. Absolutely wonderful.
But I also think that there's, so that's an external thing and that's fantastic. But I also think there's a lot of internal happiness going on. So you want to take me, walk me through internally. It sounds like the employees really enjoy working there. How does that happen?
I'd say one of the things is really listening to your employees, giving them the opportunity to have input. One of our core kind of foundations of our company is transparency. We have really always been an open book with them about, this is what's going on within the organization. These are ways that you can contribute. What has come out of that a lot of times is people have ideas and we don't just say, thanks for your idea. We'll actually give them the space to go out and try it and succeed or fail. And, if they succeed, great. That might be something that might work in other areas of the business. If they fail, let's talk about what didn't work and maybe make some tweaks and see if we could turn that into a success. So we give them a lot of autonomy, a lot of runway to be able to, be professionals in their own domain. I think allowing people that area for development, giving them a transparent look into the inner workings of the organization, that leads to a lot of happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of reached the end of our time. So are there any like parting words that you would like to offer some of the listeners for how they could implement some of these systems in their own business?
Yeah, I mean, there's a monumental amount of resources that are out there on how you can do this yourself. If you ever want to talk through best practices, ways to do this, I'm always available. I love talking shop just as much as I love working with our clients or bringing somebody on as a new client. So always happy to kind of talk through thoughts that people might have on how to better manage their contingent workforce.
Do you want to re-say that again? Can you walk me through some of the successes that your company has been through? How would another listener who has their own company implement these successes in their own business?
Yeah, so there's a lot of resources that are out there on the internet. There's really no lack of information around how to manage a contingent workforce, right? However, if you ever would like to just talk shop, you have somebody that wants to listen and maybe provide some insight, I'm always all ears. As much as I love talking with our clients or participating in sales presentations with our sales team, I'm just as happy to talk shop with somebody that's interested in the topic.
Awesome. Hey, Scott, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today on the podcast. And hey, keep on living the dream. It sounds like you're doing great over at Suna.
Thanks. Appreciate the time.